Hello, friends. I'm Kathy Fay, Executive Director of the Boston Early Music Festival, or BEMF, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to this very special pre-opera talk preparatory to our 11th annual Chamber Opera Series, featuring a fascinating pairing of comedy and drama with Telemann's Pimpinone and Eno. On Saturday, November 27th at 8 p.m. and Sunday, November 28th at 3 p.m., our traditional Thanksgiving weekend performances will take place in the exquisite New England Conservatory's Jordan Hall. Tickets for both performances are still available and can be purchased online by visiting the BEMF website at bemf.org or by calling the BEMF box office at 617-661-1812. Tickets are priced at $80, $50, and $30 for the in-person performances and $15 for the virtual event. Virtual tickets are included free with all in-person tickets, or they can be purchased on their own. And our virtual presentation will be available for a 2-week period from December 11th clear through December 26th. It is my honor to introduce the BEMF Directorial team for our Telemann double bill, esteemed musical co-directors Paul Odette and Stephen Stubbs, stage co-director and costume co-designer Gilbert Blin, Concertmaster Robert Mealy, dance director Melinda Sullivan, and stage co-director Marie-Nathalie Lacoursière. Welcome, Paul, Steve, Gilbert, Robert, Melinda, and Marie-Nathalie. Before I turn the microphone over to the six of you, as you well know, we had originally planned to stage Pimpinone in November of 2020, but the global pandemic caused us to postpone our plan, meaning this is actually the first new opera production we've built together since the June 2019 festival. So this marks a very, very important moment. And I can tell you, having attended a rehearsal of Pimpinone just yesterday, it is absolutely thrilling to have the entire BEMF company back together again. Our all-star company under your superb leadership just blew my mind yesterday. I have to tell you, between Telemann's wonderful music, the many whimsical costumes, and your elegant and hysterical socially distanced staging, this production is shaping up to be absolutely brilliant. I can't wait to see the full production. So with that, I will disappear from the screen and turn the microphone over to you, and my thanks again to all of you.
Thank you.
Back in 2014, we did a double bill of the two Pergolesi surviving comic intermezzi, La Serva Padrona and Livietta e Tracolo. And that was our first foray into comic chamber opera. And we had so much fun doing that production that we thought it would be great to go back and revisit some other comic music from the period. And Telemann's Pimpinone we knew was a wonderful piece and thought that was an excellent candidate. And with that in mind, I initially thought, why don't we see what the comic intermezzo was like in Germany, being introduced there from Italy. So we initially had the idea to pair it with Hasse's La Finta Tedesca, but because of the COVID situation, that turned out not to be practical. And so we kept Pimpinone and decided to pair it with Telemann's very late dramatic cantata, Eno. And why don't I let Steve tell you the story of how we came upon Eno as a pairing?
Well, it was kind of a by chance in a way, because just for my own pleasure, I was reading a book, an English translation of a great French musicologist and poet and literat of about 100 years ago, named Romain Rolland, who wrote a book that included little portraits of important composers. And he said he called his chapter on Telemann A Forgotten Master, which was, I thought, an interesting title. But in his description of Telemann altogether, it sort of whet my appetite to know more about Telemann, but in particular, he gives an in-depth description of this piece of Eno. And he said it was so advanced for its time, and also it was so remarkable that a man of 84 years old could write something so original and fresh and vital as this piece. So I thought, this is great. So the next time I'm going to talk to my team here, I'm just going to tell them that I was sort of thrilled to learn about this. And they all said, oh, that sounds very interesting. And Melinda said right away, that sounds like something we could stage. But at that point, we didn't realize we had a necessity for it until we realized we needed something like this to do. So we added, to the menu.
I think one of the great things about this program is that it's got Telemann in the 1720s writing these fantastic comic melodies with very influenced by Italian traditions of intermezzi. And then this amazing late drama that's just so very different. And it's really two virtuoso languages that he's speaking. I think one of the things about Telemann is that we always think, oh, we know Telemann, he's the ubiquitous Baroque composer. He's the one you can take for granted. But in exploring both of these scores for us, it's been such a revelation. There's so much humor, there's so much wit, there's so much fine detail in all the writing that it's really, really been fun to bring it to life.
I was just going to say that Telemann has the special status of not being a neglected, unknown composer. He is a very well-known composer, but he's well known to be a sort of second-rate also ran with Handel and Bach as the real stars of the Baroque. But once you've experienced the breadth of his abilities, you can find them just in these two pieces. You can't put him in that position anymore. He's somebody of great, great stature to put alongside of Handel, in my opinion.
And it's fantastic to experience these two pieces from two very different periods of his life. A comedy from 1725, and then this dramatic, hyper-dramatic cantata from 40 years later, 1765, written in an almost pre-classical style with echoes of Gluck and Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach and even Rameau, because he had just come back from Paris, where he had seen Castor et Pollux at the Paris Opera there.
And I was interested in the staging for the newer work, which would look different from a commedia work, although I didn't know how we could put that together. And Gilbert is the one who was able to figure out a way to connect the older work and the older style with the newer work. But Gilbert, you can speak more about that.
Well, yes, I mean, pairing these two pieces, besides the genius of the composer, also makes sense in terms that the intermezzi were performed originally in the middle of a serious story. So here we are, in a way, also reproducing the intended contrast between a funny and comical piece and libretto and music, but also with a contrast with a more dramatic and more grand music for the more serious story. And all that makes a perfect pasticcio, because there is always a moment where one can get too much comedy or too much tragedy. And here the pairing works not in terms of the style, but also in terms of the proportions.
And Gilbert, also maybe explain the mute character, the Arlecchino character in the Pimpinone, and how you managed to make that character also have a role in the Eno story.
Well, while we were preparing the dramaturgy of the show with Melinda and Marie-Nathalie, we thought, how can we assure a form of continuity, because we are in a chamber opera context. We don't have big change of sets, and we are always in the same chamber, the same space. So talking with my dear colleague, we figure out that the emblematic character of the stage, the most theatrical character in a way, the character of Arlecchino, typical traditional Italian commedia character, commedia dell'arte character, has such a big range of emotion in his palette that he could perfectly also relate to the tragic story of Ino, although it's not ending badly, the dramatic story of Ino, and also giving a body to the second character of the story of the cantata, which is obviously the son of Ino, Mealy, which turned out to be a god at the end. But Marie-Nathalie can, because she is our fantastic Arlecchino, maybe Marie-Nathalie, you can say a few words about the work you are doing on this very, very special character.
Well, it's interesting as at the period, the actors would play one commedia role all their life. And at what point they started to change, not change the character, but Harlequin would play different other characters. He would disguise at other characters. So we start that in Pimpinone because it's really the tradition, and we have a lot of theaters from the late 17th century that had a description of Harlequin was a lawyer, Harlequin was a different character. And so we took that and we say, okay, how can Harlequin, what characters Harlequin could be in Pimpinone. So that was kind of easier. And then we say, okay, now we have Ino, and how could we link the two of them? And so I said, well, it's going to be just another character, Triton. He could be a Triton, he could be his son, he could be, but it was interesting because, of course, a comedy, and then you go into the drama, how to switch from Harlequin, which we're used to see him in a comical way, to suddenly being in a drama. But like you said, Gilbert, Harlequin he's kind of like a child where he goes into the different emotions of what's happening. So if it's a drama, it's a drama. If it's a comedy, I think he has this ability, and it will be nice if everybody has that ability of keeping in ourselves childlike, to being émerveillé on everything that is happening. So I think it's that I'm émerveillé in Ino, and then of course in Pimpinone it's fun for me because then I play kind of a double changing, because I'm a woman playing an Harlequin, and then playing a woman in Harlequin. That woman. So that's very interesting for me as a comedian, as an actress.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's one of the great pleasures of being in rehearsal for this has been watching Marie-Nat just find these fantastic hysterical things to do on stage, and also to start seeing a little bit of how many costumes she has to wear in this, which is really fantastic. It's just for a little show, there's a lot going on.
Yes, indeed, the costume are a big part of the experience, like they have been always doing our chamber opera series. They are obviously creating and they are telling stories. And at this time, in this period of 1720s to 1760s, costume were in a permanent evolution on stage. They were giving a lot of thoughts about the possible meanings of the costumes and exploring all kind of direction. So indeed, the character of Arlecchino who disguised himself was one of the trend, like Marie-Nathalie explained, but also Ino is a story of a metamorphose. So there is a change of identity, even of obviously of status. For Ino, who is a queen, but which will be transformed as a goddess. So there is each time a different level of being on stage, which the costumes of Miriam Barry are also accentuating the magic, the common magic point of the two librettos, the two story.
Yeah.
Speaking of this, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that speaking of the stories, I think the situation of the comic intermezzo of Pimpinone is one that's well known because it's virtually the same setup as Serva Padrona, which is the really famous comic intermezzo, and many of them follow the same pattern. The idea is that the man is a rich and stupid sort of important person, you could say, and the girl is very clever and can sort of think circles around him and play with his stupidity. In fact, when they meet each other in this particular one, Vespetta says, well, this guy is not noble, but he's rich and dumb. He's perfect for me. So that's the setup. And so there's nothing really much more you need to say about that story, although it's a very interesting evolution. But the story of Ino is maybe less well known in general to people. The character of Ino, I think we call her Aino. She's the sister of Semele. So if you've ever come across Handel's Semele, you'll know some of the backstory, which is that Semele was the mortal woman who caught the eye of Jupiter, the king of the gods, and they had a liaison. And at a certain point, Juno tricks her into asking Jupiter to reveal his real self. And at that point, of course, she's burnt to a cinder, but she's already given birth to a baby who turns out to be the god Bacchus. And Bacchus is then raised by her sister, Ino. And this is the backstory you kind of really need to know. And people at the time did know that backstory to get the setup for what's happening when Ino here first bursts on stage. She's running away with a baby in her arms because Juno has also sent her husband mad. He's already killed their firstborn son, and now he's coming after her and their second. And so she's running away from him, and she ends up on a cliff, and she hurls her baby into the sea, hoping the sea gods will take pity, and then hurls herself into the sea. So you can't really get a much more dramatic setup for a story. But then what happens is a transformation under the sea, which is kind of a positive nature.
And we have the amazing Amanda Forsyth being just a fantastic diva for this occasion.
Absolutely.
And the orchestra sounds so magical. The undersea part is my favorite part of that. It's wonderful sounds.
It's very vivid orchestration. The interesting thing is that our original plan with the Telemann and the Hassa meant that it was really just a tiny, tiny little band, as we often do with the chamber operas. But for Ino, it's a grand opera, so we really needed to beef up our ensemble. So it's kind of a pocket orchestra that we have, which is fantastic. We have flutes, we have horns, we have more strings than usual. So it'll really be a wonderfully, I think, symphonic sound that we get from this. And yeah, as Melinda says, the colors that are involved in this, the remarkable gestures that Telemann creates are just really music that is unlike any other. It really is, as Paul says, it's foreshadowing all kinds of other stuff, but it's very much Telemann's own language, and very, very, very particular language that I think we never get to hear. So it's a wonderful moment to bring this to life.
It was very impressive for me to see that Telemann is not anymore a forgotten master, obviously, but he's still a neglected opera composer. And definitely this two piece, which shows the scope of his work on stage, for the stage, on opera or dramatic cantata, is impressive. The use of the orchestra for literally the painting of the coast of Greece and then the water, the sea landscape is absolutely thrilling. And in Pimpinone, the imagination, the wit, and all the distance he takes by his music from the story, by commenting on the story with his own critical approach, if I can say something like that, is so rich, and there is so many colors in both pieces. It's truly a master.
Yes, I'm having a blast, creating the character because the music is so rich. And so I always have my face in the score because I'm like, oh my God. And then the music is the other character. It's like there's a fourth character. Really, it's really interesting, and sometimes you think it's gonna go there, and it's not going there. It's going somewhere else. So it's really rich. I'm really surprised too about Telemann. It's because of course I know the duet, Telemann duet, and we know and then this was like, wow, this is so rich. Really,
You can really tell that he grew up in the opera house. He was a creature of the opera from his undergraduate days on.
And also the thing that kept striking me as we're working on Pimpinone is the sense of fun that he has. For instance, there's an aria where Pimpinone says that Vespetta is confusing him. He's all turned around in his head. And in fact, the music is intentionally confusing and so witty and so fun. And I was thinking, in the comparison with the other great composers of the time, like Bach and Handel, can you imagine either of them coming up with something so funny and fun? Yeah. Hard to imagine.
The double voice, the area of Doug with the double voice, where he
exactly.
does characters.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
But I think that we forget that Telemann was a master of comic theatrical music. His whole career, he wrote comedies. We've lost a lot of them. We've lost the companion piece to Pimpinone. We lost the piece, the comic intermezzo that was performed a month before the premiere of Pimpinone. But there are numerous full-length comic operas like Socrates, for instance, and Emma und Egenhard, and Damon. And these are not performed very often today. So this aspect of Telemann's personality is not well known. But I think Telemann has been badly represented in modern times, because when you read that when Leipzig was looking for a new director, Telemann was the #1 person on the list, and Bach was at the bottom of the list. And people think, well, what were they thinking in the 18th century? Well, what they knew was the real Telemann, the guy who wrote fantastic cantatas, more than 48 passions, oratorios, opera. He could write in every possible style, and that's the least familiar music of Telemann. So for me, one of the most exciting things about this production is being able to present these two very different pieces, showing two different sides of Telemann, but absolutely masterful in both ways.
There's a thing that we've been talking about and thinking about, which is the logical thing you might think is that Pergolesi's Serva Padrona was the comic intermezzo that made a splash all over Europe, and in fact it went to France, it went to England, it went everywhere. And so you'd think that this Pimpinone would be the reception of that style by Telemann, but it's not the case, because Pimpinone predates Serva Padrona by about a decade. And so the question is not, did Pergolesi influence Telemann, because that didn't happen, but what was the common source for both of them? And it seems to be in the Venetian comic intermezzo tradition, with composers like Albinoni and Orlandini, and composers we basically don't know these days, but we're kind of curious now to get to know them.
And hopefully go back to explore more the Telemann stage works. Definitely something which would be worth exploring and bringing to our dear audience.
Definitely.
Well, this whole process has just been such a tremendous pleasure. I mean, for one thing, just coming together again as a stage company is such a great delight to watch these singers really own these roles and find their way into these characters is just so fantastic. And for us to discover this music and bring it to life with each other is a perpetual delight in these rehearsals. It's really, really, really fun to be doing this again. So we hope you all will come.
We can't wait to share it with you.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Together again.
Indeed.